Good morning. Welcome to a lecture on Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. This play caused quite a shock in the middle of the 20th century. It was perhaps the best ever example of what came to be called absurd theater, or theater of the absurd. And so much of what I'm going to try to do in this lecture is clarify for you a little bit within the course we're taking the notion of absurdity as it's being referred to in this particular work and in connection with what we're doing in CVSP 204. In order to do that, I have to give you a lecture. I'd much rather just be presenting the play for you in a play reading. We used to do this. This is the old West Hall stage before this one was came to birth. And that's Professor David Kurani on the right, playing Estragon. The person playing Vladimir is no longer here. Later on, you might recognize somebody who comes on a bit later. But we used to do a play reading of this play, and we're hoping to continue that tradition again, perhaps even as of next spring. So I will keep this going there so that as you get bored by me giving the lecture, you can at least have something visual to be watching. It's a dramatized play reading of Act 1 of the play you are reading, which is in 2 acts. And that's going to be one of the questions you'll want to address. Why is this a 2-act play, whereas plays are usually 1 act, 3 act, 5 act, sometimes 4 act, sometimes rarely 2 acts. And so why did Beckett choose to present his work in a 2-act play? And that will be referred to during this work. But the main thing that you want to come out of the lecture with, hopefully, is do you have some kind of an understanding of what absurdity means in literature, in philosophy, and within this course. Because when somebody says it's absurd, people can understand many different things. When we say it's tragic, people can understand many things. Hopefully, if you've been taking CVSP courses, in 201, 205, courses like that, tragic became a reality to you about something about a way of understanding human life generally, not just an event is a tragic event. And so now with absurdity, because in the middle of the 20th century, it very much reflected a mood of Western man, certainly, or European man, and America and Europe, Western man, a kind of malaise, a kind of discomfort that they came to. You've already had Freud, and Freud's book that you've read, one of the first titles he gave it before it became Civilization and its Discontents was Man's Malaise in Society. Discomfort, you don't belong, alienation, this sort of feeling about, that came to bear in a world of, in Europe where so much had happened, there was so much progress, there was so much hope in the modern period with science and technology and discovery and all sorts of things, so much hope going on. And then at the same time, there came World War I, and then the Great Depression, and then World War II. This came as a kind of a wake-up call to the human being who thought that, the comfortable world, in a sense, that was being created, the bourgeois comfortable world that was being created in the West, the consumer society. You students are the consumers, and we're the ones who are marketing things to you. This whole thing was coming to bear, and this, of course, was how people like Kierkegaard and then Nietzsche, which you've read, and Dostoevsky, and the prophetic thinkers of the 19th century felt like a disease was hitting the human being through all this, despite all this scientific progress and progress in so many fields. The human being somehow was becoming, dwindling into a kind of a caricature of what the human being really is meant to be. Living off living for comfort, living for your comfort zone, living for the bourgeois ideal of that. And so hopefully already with Nietzsche, you've been seeing some of the, how Nietzsche scathingly blasts away at this kind of what was happening to the human being. This is the heart of Nietzsche, not just his conclusions, which may interest you, may not, but the spirit of the man was was a kind of a wake-up call. Well, by the mid-century, you now had people writing plays of this type, and this perhaps is the best example of it, really, the simplest to understand what was going on within this whole thing. Human beings who came to the conclusion that that life is neither tragic and heroic, because tragic always meant heroic. This was the Nietzschean spirit, the tragic, heroic spirit. We don't live for happiness. We live for excellence. We live for the Uberman. We live for doing something great, something you're leaving our mark on what's going on. And as he said, what he sees is not the survival of the fittest. He sees the survival of the unfittest. He sees the leveling process of this understanding of democracy, which is not, and by no means the true meaning of the full essence of democracy. So now life was not tragic, heroic in any way, nor was it comic in the sense that comic meant that, it makes sense, and if we do our best, we can improve things, infinite perfectibility of man, automatic progress. That's the meaning of comic now in a philosophical sense, not ha ha ha. But is life tragic, is life comic, or whatever? No, life had become now this one conclusion about life that Beckett is giving us, is life is absurd. Life is absurd. And meaning, you see, so very, very important. In psychiatry and psychotherapy and psychology in the 20th century, after Freud, some of the critics of Freud, and you should read the critics of Freud, because it's much more interesting than just Freud, to see how that developed. He sparked off something, but then one of the main critics of it was telling him, sure, sex and aggression and all the things you're talking about are real, and we need to understand them, and they're all that. But that's what really makes a human being move. What really moves the human being is a search for meaning. Meaning. When you stop feeling there's a meaning to life, then life stops having any real substance. And so this conclusion about life, that life can be understood as absurd, its basic meaning is this. There's no satisfying meaning. There's a meaning, there are many meanings. You can explain away things without explaining them, and you can give meanings without giving meaning, because these terms are now being used in the deepest human sense of it. If I don't have a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, I will dwindle. So sex, aggression, very important. All the things that Freud and others would speak about, but meaning. And so now here we're seeing played out in drama now, this whole, that's what this experience, the experience of Waiting for Godot, when it's being presented as a play and when you're approaching it, it's what it's meant to do is to give you a direct experience of the absurdity of life through everything that happens in this play. Not just to write about it, or Sartre writes about it, and Camus writes about it, and many people wrote about it, and Shakespeare even had many things in it, in his work where you could see something of the absurd there. But primarily now you have a play that's fully focused on presenting to you directly, and this is art as opposed to philosophy or anything else. Art is meant to give you a direct experience of something. It's meant to draw you in to the artist's creative mind and what he was doing when she or he was doing when they were presenting their work of art. That's why if you just take a look for a minute at the picture, at the photocopy, unfortunately I'd like to give it to you in color at least, but it would cost too much. You can look it up now on the web for yourselves. Guernica. Have any of you ever been exposed to Picasso's Guernica? All right. This is one of the most famous paintings of the 20th century. And it very much represents the sort of movement in art and in theater and in the whole world of art and theater and music, away from documentary type of, representational type of art, where you just present something the way it happens, but rather art is meant to give you an interpretation, a human interpretation of human experience. And so Guernica, of course, is the Spanish Civil War in the first half of the 20th century. For those of you who, you should know some bit of the history of the 20th century. There was a lot of ferment there. But in Spain, particularly, there was the Spanish Civil War. And Picasso presented this great painting out of that experience. And so when you take a look at it, notice the fragmentation. No, this is like, a hand grenade has been, somebody, la samahalla, comes in and blows himself up, and you take a look at at this whole thought after. You'll get a picture of what he was saying. This is what people were living at the time. This is reality, not the philosophy and the art and all the theoretical stuff that you're talking about. We're living this civil war, and we're living what's happening in the mid-20th century. We're living all this ferment, and how can I capture it in a work of art? Well, Guernica is one great effort to do that. Well, Waiting for Godot in the world of theater is a stellar example of this. Nobody else, I think, has ever been able to present this notion that life is absurd so succinctly, so well. 2 acts only. And one of the reasons for this is because what happens in the play, let me read out some things to you so that I don't just ad lib. Let me get you into what the play is all about. Actually, maybe that'll help then my commenting on it. Well, first of all, Beckett was born in 1906 to middle-class Protestant parents near very Catholic Dublin, Ireland. A bright student of modern languages at Trinity College in Dublin. Upon graduation, he taught at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure in Paris between 28 and 30, returning to Dublin to hold the position of assistant lecturer in French at Trinity College. 2 years later, he left an academic career to travel around Germany and France until in 1937, he decided to settle down permanently in Paris. During World War II, he joined the Muqawami, the French resistance, working near Avignon as an agricultural laborer. After the war, he settled back in Paris and decided to write in the French language. Think about that. Because if you write in your own language, you can tend to write cliches, you can tend to write, things just to show how clever you can use the language. By forcing himself to write in the French language, he had to force himself to think about every word he was saying. Although this particular work came out in, almost like automatic writing, he says, it just all came out at in one spurt. But the reason why he decided to write always in French was to make himself, really think about what he's saying, so that what's coming out is not just sort of because of some expertise in writing or in some cleverness in, philosophical background, or, he was a secretary to Proust in literature and all of that. So many of his most famous works, including Waiting for Godot, were initially created and presented in French, later to be translated by himself into his mother tongue. In 1959, Trinity University bestowed upon him an honorary doctorate in letters. In 1969, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, and this was what was said about it, quote, "for writing which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man." Writing which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man. So the destitution of modern man is what's being presented to you in the early part of this literary part of 204. The twilight of a civilization, death in Venice. Freud, with all of his focusing on the instincts only, and the death instinct, whatever, and now, with this particular, with everything that was happening around them, World War I, 29. So, the most educated people, progress. We're carving away at each other in Europe. Okay, World War I, so much for the perfectibility of man, or that science is going to bring heaven on earth, or all the slogans of those who were into the Enlightenment ideals. Then you had World War II. So the writing which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man. This was a great artist who was able to capture in theater now, like Guernica was able to capture it in painting, something of the experience of a large amount of humanity who couldn't put it into painting, and who couldn't put it. So art helps us to see things which we wouldn't see had not the gifted person were able to do that. So when you take a look at that painting, that photocopy, especially if you see it in its original, think about, of course, none of you really lived through the civil war here in Lebanon. Those who lived here, for 15, 16 years of war, endless, seemingly ceaseless war, you can relate to, and you can sort of thank a Picasso or a Beckett for being able to put into art, because, as another famous writer whom we used to read for André Malraux, he said, all art is a victory over the human condition, meaning here the doom that we're under, the curse we're under as a human race, all right? All art is a victory over that. That's where so this is the whole aspect of tragedy, of course. In tragedy, it's Oedipus's heroism that's great, not the gods and the cosmos and what's happening around him, but rather the human being, Gilgamesh, the great human being in that world, not the gods or the system or anything else. What's great is the human being who carves out meaning in a seemingly meaningless world. So now in the 20th century, this was being presented very concretely, given to what was happening around, in this kind of work. So for writing, which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man, the twilight of a civilization, death in Venice, Freud telling you, all your delusions about yourself as somehow rational man or romantic man or all the things. He calls this putting makeup on you in the morning. He says, my fellow man, with few exceptions, is good for nothing. All right, and so when we try to say the goodness of man, he said this is like cosmetics, putting some not facing who you really were. So he's written important novels, poems, short stories, in addition to plays and mimes for stage and radio. He died in 1991. For more detailed biographical notes, you have the web. I'm not going to waste my time giving you any more than that, but just to put you into the atmosphere of the person. To understand this play, because it's a play, and like on my fly sheet there I have for you a play, almost, action, plot, character, setting. All right, if any of you were exposed to Oedipus, because that's in our CVSP world, in 201 and 205 and 207 we do Oedipus the King. It's up to you if you've never had it, but Oedipus the King was a great model of a play that has has character. It has sorry. Let me just read this off. It starts off with a definite situation: the plague in Thebes, the need to discover and remedy the cause of the plague. The situation has a clear development as bit by bit the truth was revealed to Oedipus until finally all the issues, tensions, problems in the play reached their climax and then resolution, and the play ended. There was a clear storyline proceeding in a linear direction via plot and action. Moreover, Sophocles presented us with carefully created characters: Oedipus, his mother Jocasta, the prophet Tiresias, the shepherds, etc., people with a past as well as a future, human beings who for the most part spoke, acted, and reacted in a way easily identifiable as portraying meaningful human activity and behavior, thought, and feeling. The setting was recognizable: Oedipus's plush palace in Thebes and the surrounding area. Furthermore, events followed one another in such a way that even a CS faculty member like myself could get a clear sense of chronology, of time. Time behaved itself, didn't play tricks on either us or the characters. Seemingly serious human themes and issues were being presented, worthy of consideration by serious students of CS. In a word, with Oedipus the King, like that kind of play, in other words, we're comfortable in this sense. We form a reasonably clear idea of what's going on. We never have the feeling that someone is playing some kind of silly trick on us, making us to pay money for nothing. Any discomfort and bewilderment we experienced was connected with poor old Oedipus and the horror of his objective situation. He had to kill his daddy and sleep with his mommy no matter whatever he tried to do. All right? But other than that, there's no confusion, there's no ambiguity in terms of the storyline, what was happening, the characters. Beckett's Waiting for Godot, on the other hand, offers no such comforting qualities, features, or characteristics. No comfort. The curtain opens, we don't know where we are, alas, neither from the setting itself, nor from anything the actors do or say. Two characters, Vladimir and Estragon. They call each other Didi and Gogo. Vladimir and Estragon, dressed in Charlie Chaplin-esque type costumes of a gentleman manqué, someone who was rich, European civilization, but now is a bum on the streets, okay, but still wearing clothes that, the Charlie Chaplin type of costume that sometimes you see him if you watch any of his. They co-inhabit a place which is totally free from any specificity. It's like a dreamscape, it's like a shot of the moon, surrealistic. Neither we nor they know where it is geographically, nor will we know any more about it by the end of the play. Who are the two characters? Well, again, we share in the characters' own ignorance. Neither they nor we know anything of consequence as to their identity, background, biography, in a word. Vague remembrances, disconnected phrases here and there, but no solid facts. A little while later, we meet two more personages, Pozzo and Lucky. They're on the stage, I think, up there now. But if we had any hopes that their appearance would shed any clear information on the subject, their exit leaves us even deeper in the dark. For now, instead of asking ourselves, who are Vladimir and Estragon? We wonder now, who are Vladimir, Estragon, Pozzo, and Lucky? The play's last character to make his physical entrance is a boy, a messenger sent by Godot, the one the tramps say they are waiting for Godot. The boy tells them, Godot won't come this evening, but surely tomorrow. Now, this indeed is the only quasi-concrete piece of data that's given to us, that Vladimir and Estragon are waiting for Godot, and that he will surely come tomorrow. Everything else that has happened hangs in a cloud of unknowing. No satisfactory causation or motivation is evident. This is the one piece of seeming certainty and purpose and meaning in the play so far. They are waiting for Godot, who sends a messenger to tell them he can't come that evening, but surely he will come tomorrow. Act 1 ends shortly thereafter. Act 2 begins of this two-act play. Now, except for one apparently superficially significant change, Pozzo is blind and Lucky dumb, we sit through more or less the same sort of thing that took place in Act 1. Once again, a messenger boy comes at the end of the act to announce that Godot can't make it that evening, but surely he will come the next day, and the play ends. Bukra bil mishmish, for those of you who know Russian, in other words, all right? So, the time has passed with the characters doing many things. There's lots of activity, but there's no action. Action has purpose. Action gives meaning. Activity is what you do. Remember, you already had this in Freud. You know, he said at the age he reached, he couldn't write anything more serious. So, you know, he wrote Civilization and its Discontents just to pass the time, passing the time. That's the key issue in Waiting for Godot. What we do in life is activity, never action. It's just passing the time. And what are we passing the time for? Waiting for Godot. What is Godot? Okay, you know that obviously by now. The meaning is something that will give us serious meaning to our lives. All right? 2 acts. Why 2? 1, you would think, well, maybe he'll come tomorrow. 3, it would be boring, artistically bad. All right, just a third repetition. But you need the 2 to get the point that he's not clearly coming. He may come. You see, everything, limbo. There's you're never clear about anything. Will he come? Won't he come? If you know he won't come, that's too definite. If you know he will come, that's too definite. That would give some kind of purpose, some kind of meaning, something for action. But rather, all we do in life is wait for something to come that will give us this, will take us out of this bondage, this limbo, and put us into either hell or heaven, but with some meaning. So the time has passed, okay, with the characters doing many things. So it's great fun, by the way. It's great fun to act. It's great fun to direct it. It's great fun to, when it's done well. It's meant to be something fun. It's not meant to be serious and solemn. That kills the play when people do it that way. All right, it's meant to be full of fun. He calls it a tragicomedy, but not in the typical sense, the technical sense of a tragicomedy in literature and plays. Everything he gives is his own meaning. It's a tragicomedy in the sense that it's neither tragic nor comic. All right? A tragicomedy has a meaning. But in his sense, this word is neither tragic nor comic. It's at the same time tragic and comic, and therefore there's no resolution. All right? It's just paralysis, equilibrium, a status, a low-level equilibrium. You never quite know what's going to happen. That's what the whole play tries to express for you. So they're doing many things, talking, arguing, eating, bickering, thinking, urinating, dancing, complaining. We've been entertained if it's done well, or bored if it hasn't, moved to tears or laughter or boredom, confusion and perplexity. Where are they? Who are they? What are they doing? What's happening in terms of some meaningful action and development? Well, we may understand one critic who first attended the play. The next day he wrote, "Nothing happens. twice. Nothing happens twice. But you see, that has meaning. Right? There's nothing happens. It isn't that it was boring or that it has no meaning whatsoever. The meaning is life is absurd. Life is a paralysis. Life doesn't give you any clarity so that you can go in any definite direction. But your conclusion should not be, if you conclude you should commit suicide, you're illogical because you're claiming you have something definite. All right? Or if you claim we should hope, there's hope, that's, again, you have no basis for either hope or despair. All right? You hang in between. And Beckett says he loves a phrase that comes from the New Testament. Christ was crucified between two thieves. And he says one of the thieves was saved and one of the thieves was damned. Now that's, of course, not in the New Testament because it never tells you who was saved or damned. That's supposedly something only God knows about. But, a person reading it can get that conclusion that obviously this guy must have been damned and this one must have been saved. He says, I love that phrase because it gives you a perfect balance. Neither despair nor hope. He says, don't despair, one of the thieves was saved. But don't hope because one of the thieves was damned. So this is the spirit of what he's trying to do through this whole play. Now, as you read it, of course, it's going to be much harder for you to get that. But I'm giving you all this as a kind of a clue. Keep this in mind as you try to read it yourselves, and try to see what's happening in this particular play just by reading it. Unfortunately, hopefully, you'll see in it that this is everything he's doing is in one way or another trying to show you how there's only activity, not action. We always find something, ADD, to give us the impression we exist, is one of the lovely lines in this work. We always find something to give us the impression we exist. So we pass the time, we do things, we build civilization. I'm a civilization and its discontents, all right? What is civilization for Freud? Just a defense, sort of a compensation for the fact we can't get what we really want. Sex and aggression. Finally, even aggression was later in his life. That's what we really want because we can't have it. What do? We build civilization. You see, sort of this sort of whatever the word is for it, that life is really nasty because it's getting us to do things to build civilization, but we don't really want that. We want something else. They're forcing us to marry this person. We really want to marry this person. This is the atmosphere of this sort of that's into all of this. So basically, then, I do want to go on with some of the points on your fly sheet so that you can get something clear that you can look at. But before I do go any further, I do want to make another comment, general comment, and then I'll make a few comments on some of the main points that are there on your fly sheet. Basically, the artistic atmosphere, the atmosphere in the world of art, in other words, was anti-realism, because by the end of the 20th century, so much stuff was happening, just sort of sentimental, flowery, happy endings. They changed King Lear to the great tragedy to have a happy ending. Everything was going into that direction. And commercialism, we don't have any of that today, of course, but commercialism and that sort of a thing. So there was a reaction against this and saying, no, theater has to, all of art should be scientific realism. Really is the basic atmosphere. Environmental realism. It should present to you life as it is, so that you will take a look at what's really happening in the socio-economic, political world around you and the psychological world. Science, the scientific determinism became the main rubric there. And so all art and theater itself should be presenting works in a way that clear, documentary style, presenting something about a real issue in society to wake you up to it so that you will do something about it. Okay, so the art should be realistic, naturalistic, all right, in that sense. A great reaction to this happened immediately amongst artists, saying, hey, that's not art. Art is giving you a subjective interpretation, a human, I hate the word subjective because it has negative meanings, but here the subject, the human subject, presenting something that they're seeing, that they're living. Sight is life in this sense, and presenting it through art. And so in this whole world of anti-realism in theater, well, in art, you have expressionism, Dadaism, surrealism, cubism, all kinds of movements came up in the world of painting and art. But in the world of theater, We had crap. Anybody know what crap is? Have you ever heard that word before? Crap? Well, you're lucky. Okay, but crap, C-R-A-P, okay? Theater of cruelty, theater of revolt, theater of the absurd, theater of paradox. 4 movements at this time within theater. You know, to present life, you see, is full of cruelty. Life is a question of revolt. That's what we should be doing. Life is absurd. There's no clear meaning. Life is a paradox. Crap. Okay, so all of this is certainly not socioeconomic environmentalism, scientific determinism. All this is a challenge to the human being to delve into the ocean of human experience that cannot be put into a computer or into just simply, leave that for science and for technology and for all the stuff there. But for the human world, the more expansive it is, the more challenging it is, the more ambiguous you are presented with things, the more you have to delve into it to find the meaning or to give the meaning if there's no meaning there. This was the artistic atmosphere. The philosophical aspect, and it's very important, a man named Heidegger, all right? In European thought, is extremely important in the early 20th century, and by this time, therefore, if you take a look at the fly sheet there, the human being is, it actually should be where Peter Sellers and Being There are. If you can still get that, the film Being There, lovely testimony to the great actor Peter Sellers, and it also has this same basic theme in there that, Peter Sellers in that play plays a handicapped gardener who, when the people taking care of him die, he's thrown out into the world. And in the world there, now people start to meet him, and they read into him all kinds of meaning, where he's just him. He's just saying what he's saying. There's no thought in there. There's no meaning. But people sort of are reading into him because they're hungry for meaning, and so they read into something where there is no clear meaning. They start to read in everything they want to see in him. By the end of Being There, he has become a Donald Trump. He's become a candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. So the play is a very nice play there. But, sorry, for those, I hate to insult you Trump lovers, but the point there being that this is what Beckett himself thinks about this particular play. He thinks it's a play where what you should see in it is no clear meaning, and that you are being invited to invest yourself into what do you get from this play. What do you understand from this play? And then fine, that's the full stop. He says, I put no meaning into this, and if people want to find meaning into it and want to write critiques and want to give lectures and CS about it and get a headache, he says, well, let them get their own aspirin, all right? So when I give you a headache, aspirin is going to be poured out there, all right? Because I have to, in CS, I have to give you an interpretation. So I'm going to give the interpretation through the philosophical atmosphere as well as the artistic, which I've already done. The philosophical atmosphere of Heidegger and the whole notion of being thrown into the world, all right? A very interesting thing from Heidegger. The human being, once you start to think about life, and you start to reflect on life and try to find meaning in life, the first thing, according to this kind of approach to thought and philosophy, first thing you should recognize, right there staring in the face, is you're just thrown into the world. All right? You don't know where you come from. You don't have enough solid evidence to know where you come from, where you're going, what you're supposed to do, Everything you have is just things you picked up by habit and custom, as Hume would say. You've just picked up things, that's in the culture or whatever, or what, your tiny little brain has reached, and you think, you're in the 20th century, therefore it must be wonderful. All right? Rather, you notice that really, really deeply speaking, humanly speaking, in this atmosphere of the devastation and all this, that, I'm thrown into the world. That's what I am. So therefore, then, what comes from this? Let me take you down to 7b, man as thrown into the world, all right? Now, what does this mean? What is this, how is this played out in literature and novels and philosophy, and what this play perhaps is a symbolic, allegorical presentation of this? That basically, what gives us meaning usually? God, society, humanistic values. You put whatever you want there, all right? In the European world of the mid-20th century, with everything that was happening, God no longer was very, very important for men. I wish you don't talk about numbers. That's ridiculous. Truth is not a question of numbers. But many people were finding that their traditional religious beliefs in God were not giving them the kind of meaning that they needed to live their full human life. Society, the polis, the Roman Empire, all right, the whatever, the great, the church, the ummah, all right? Society gives you your meaning to life. Well, society, you've just been through Freud. Man's malaise in society. It's your main source of unhappiness. It's your main source of discomfort. So certainly not, society isn't going to give you meaning in life. Humanistic values, fraternité, égalité, liberté, non-senseté, a brave new world, and the new Middle East, and all the slogans that we love to hear. The Arab Spring, it gives you something to sort of take up your time, to take your mind off the truth of who you are. So you never have to really face who you really are. According to this, by the way, I'm not preaching this, by the way, I'm teaching this. All right. Who you really are, finally, is this is the silences in the play. When you read the play, you'll notice lots of silences. And he says silence is pouring into this play like water into a sinking ship. Now why? Because silence usually had meant, meditation. You come in touch with God, or you come in touch with your real self, or it's a place where silence is for the mature thinker, and that it's supposed to be something, where you can find yourself, and you find meaning through silence. Here they run away from silence all the time, and that's the mechanism of the play. They do something, blah 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 blah, blah, do whatever they do, then silence. And blah, 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 and silence. Blah, 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 blah. They cannot face the truth that will come to them in silence. The truth that there is no meaning in life is not to be found. So this is the man as thrown into the world. Nothing that really gives you meaning easily. Okay. Malraux used the biblical phrase "in the beginning," where you have "in the beginning God," because God gives meaning to everything. Now he says, no, in the beginning, solitude, the inescapable aloneness, not loneliness and you find a friend, aloneness, in the middle of all your friends, in the middle of being a comrade in a Marxist revolution, in Malraux's book, Man's Fate. I'm alone. Nobody understands me. I barely understand myself. There's no meaning even in terms of my self-identity. I'm alone, alienation, total alienation, solitude. That's the first truth. See, you've got to start to go through truths that reveal themselves to you as you think, phenomenologically, not just analytically and abstractly, but something you're describing because you're experiencing it. All right. So this is one experience on the way to building the truth about your own humanity. Okay, solitude, no fellowship, no empathy, no communication. Language is impotent. So notice the use of language in this play. Language is broken down. They speak at tangents to each other. They speak at the same time. They speak to each other, but they never get through to each other. Language. الإنسان الحيوان الناطق. The man is his pride is he has language, right? Whatever you think of dolphins and others, supposedly this is what characterizes the human. Language has broken down in the play, so notice that as you're going through. It's impotent to provide true communication, empathy, real contact with other humans. The essence of life is anguish, meaningless mortality. The first truth, that hits you, when you're starting to look for truths after this existential reality, is mortality, death. Okay, death in Venice. Death is from Gilgamesh. The first thing that they were looking for. Death is seemingly something everybody is interested in, but it's meaningless. Notice that term there. That's very, very important. Not just mortality, because people find answers to give them some meaning to death. If they believe there's an afterlife, if they believe there's reincarnation, if they believe whatever they believe, if they believe it's just going to stop and you're never going to feel anything anymore. People give some kind of meaning to death, generally speaking. Here, there's no clear meaning. meaninglessness. And because there's no meaning to death, and because death is such a horrible existential reality in human life, this meaninglessness is the horrible aspect of this philosophy of the absurd. It's meaningless. Monotony, not boredom. Everything's at the same tone. Everything's at the same level. So urinating or speaking about the Bible or whatever they do here, this all has the same level. We always find something, ADD, to give us the impression we exist. There's no hierarchy. Socrates and the pig. You like bacon, you prefer pigs to Socrates, we don't like philosophy. There's no hierarchy of values. Everything is at the same level. The threat of nothingness, absolute annihilation, the silences, the pauses have this other meaning here. That the thing that perhaps you're going to face here is meaninglessness, and worse than that, total annihilation, meaning you're going to disappear as a meaningful creature. All right? So he uses the pauses and the silences there, that we're being threatened with nothingness. Nothingness doesn't just mean nothing as opposed to something. Why is there something rather than nothing? Philosophy and all of that. No, nothingness is the threat that you have no meaning. There's no real sense to who you are. All of these are basic elements which you will find in the play itself. If I had more time, I'd give you examples, but you're going to have to look for it because I'm pretty sure I'm running out of time. But all of these things are elements and ingredients in what's called the absurd in this sense. So a philosophy of the absurd, that life is absurd finally, will include these elements. This is, by the way, another end to the individualism of the modern period. Where it started off, the individual find himself as an individual against society, or revolting against society, changing society, but not just as a part of society. The individual standing out, existing. Right? This is now what that whole line of thinking and giving meaning to European thinking has come to an end here. The individualism here is solitude. Total alienation, total, nothing that really you can communicate with meaning. Now, what's the human response to all of this? This is the situation, eh? That's the situation we live in. Life is absurd. So how do we respond to it? Because that's always the question, okay? In whatever world you start off with, whatever you start building off with, finally we want to know, well, how does a human respond to this? If this is light, if you like, if this is enlightenment, true enlightenment, that's what life is really all about. Well, what do I do here? Okay, you've found elements of this in Sophocles and Shakespeare and Dostoevsky, Malraux, Sartre, Camus. You find elements of this type of thing in much literature, and all through this. I find it in Gilgamesh. I find it in But the point is here now, a play is being focused on just this main topic, and the very big difference in the other works that you have there, and this is a major work. I want to make a major difference. I'd like to help you understand the difference between existential thinking in the 20th century, which follows Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Dostoevsky and people like this, and absurdity. Okay? Existential thinking focuses on, life. The absurdity of life is a challenge. It's not the final truth. It's part of the truth, an important ingredient, which is to challenge you to get off your backside and to get off your ass and to do something, because you're the only being on this planet that can give meaning. So the response is through commitment, authenticity, live life. You give the Nietzschean thing. If you took all these things in Nietzsche, you'll find them in Dostoevsky, you'll find them in Kierkegaard before Nietzsche, and these are not new, but they say this is what life is all about. Respond to this challenge with the way you live life, the authenticity, with the choices you make, with the responsibility you take. Freedom, with Sartre it becomes absolute freedom. The rebel creator, the Promethean Faustian character, that this is who you are as a human being, someone who will give meaning, where you won't simply take meaning on a silver platter and accept it passively, but rather will face the challenge of meaninglessness to create meaning. And this, of course, in the 20th century came up in both atheism and theism. In the Christian world, following someone like Kierkegaard and others who came after him in Dostoevsky and went back to Pascal and Augustine, that this is what Christianity, what religion, what monotheism ought to be really about. Doing something about the world, the mess that humans are making of the world, and changing it. Not waiting for a heaven afterlife, but bringing heaven onto this earth by your life, by your response, not just, doing the things you're supposed to do so you'll get a visa into heaven or you'll avoid hell or any of the sort of, that sort of approach to religion. But of course in the atheistic world that's where it was more popular, became more common and more widespread, with people following, people like Sartre and Camus and others like this, that, there is no God. See, in theistic thing, there's a God, but this God, what God is giving you, the meaning he gives you, is not for you to accept it in this passive, silly way, but it's rather for you to be in the image and likeness of God, and so therefore to take, to be God-like on this earth and do something about making the earth heavenly. In the Lord's Prayer in Christianity, every day they pray, make this earth like heaven, bring heaven down onto earth. But, how many monotheists or Christians get that point? So the existential revolt in Christianity in the West through this kind of literature was for all of this commitment, authenticity, choice, responsibility, activity, etc. The atheistic, of course, say there's no God. You are God. That was the meaning, of course, that Nietzsche was looking at tragically. There is no God was not sort of the garden variety atheism and comfortable atheism. For him it was a shocking thing. There is no God. And we have killed him. He says in the God is dead. But the response he took in his atheistic response was, I have to be God, and therefore I have to live at the highest possible level so that I can give meaning and I can bring in a higher level of humanity, the Uberman, in everything that I'm trying to do. I can be a master rather than a slave, because you can be a master or a slave in anything you do. It's not the function of this particular ideology or this particular religion or this particular philosophy. The master and slave morality, and if you understand Nietzsche, is the challenge of every human. The challenge, you're going to be a slave, you're going to live your life in the slave way, whatever is your ideology. Or if you're an atheist, you can be a slave, not just if you're a believer. So in Beckett, however, now in the absurd, in the world of the absurd and absurdity, all this stuff is just giving yourself the impression you have meaning and you exist. The only logical thing you can do is to wait. Ergo, the title of the work, Waiting for Godot. That's what life is about, waiting for something that really will convince you that there's some meaning there. So far, nothing has done this. So basically, the whole mechanism of the play is one of paralysis, equilibrium. One thing balances out the other. A positive balances out the negative. The long speech of Lucky, which I would love to read, is a wonderful theatrical piece of equilibrium. Is God compassionate and does he care for us, or is he the Greek god of the detached, doesn't care, etc.? Both are there. At the same time. So God is, you don't know, is God that way or is God that way? So everything in there is kind of a balance, kind of a paralysis. You can't take any action. You just go on living, waiting, doing things, building civilization, doing whatever you're doing, but, in terms of meaning, there's no meaning. He calls himself the complete agnostic. The complete agnostic, not just your garden variety agnostic, just like Nietzsche wasn't his garden variety atheist. You have to understand these terms. Don't just make them umbrella words to sort of pigeonhole people. Waiting here is metaphysical, ontological. That's who we are. We are the waiting, the animal who waits. It's not just functional waiting or theoretical waiting, like waiting for this boring lecture to end. It'll end. But the waiting that he's talking about in human life is, it's much deeper. It's more ontological. It's more our being. That's who we are. It's a tragic comedy is life. I've already commented on that. It's neither tragic nor comic. Tragic comedy in theater has a specific meaning, so don't look up for a dictionary, for heaven's sake, don't look for dictionary definitions of some of these philosophical terms that we use when you get into looking into literature and philosophy. See why does he call it a tragic comedy? Look at the play and see what he's doing in the play. It's at one and the same time it's tragic, and at the same time it's comic. Freud, Thucydides, Sophocles, many people had explored this kind of aspect of life, but here you have the message. The medium is the message. The medium itself gives you all of this. They're not writing prose about it, but the play itself is giving you these things directly. The medium is the message here. That's the greatness of this particular work. It is therefore the spirit, the ethos of the failure of the gods of modernity and all the promises, as well as any other promises that still are living, all gods here, meaning not just one particular religious belief, but all the perfectibility of the human being, automatic progress will bring heaven on earth, all this stuff, that all these gods have failed. And so now you just have to wait and see. Maybe something will come that will give. So what is Godot, therefore, finally, for you and me, for each one of us? Anything, the expectation of which keeps us living, keeps us waiting. Living is waiting. Whatever keeps us going, that's our Godot. So think for yourself from this point of view. I'm teaching you this. I'm not preaching it. But empathy means put yourself in the place of this whole thing and do the exercise of what do you think from this point of view, from this perspective, as Nietzsche would say. Perspective, remember, is not relativism. Perspective is a serious human understanding and take on life, which other humans ought to take seriously, even if they disagree with it. And they can't disagree until they really empathize to understand what's being talked about, so that you don't get superficial external criticism of something, or rejection, or acceptance. So Godot, therefore, presents a life of minimal hope. And then after I prepared this lecture, I read Alfonso Sastre, not Sartre, and he called it hopeless hope, which I thought was brilliant, much better. That's more in the keeping of this equilibrium. It's hopeless hope. Right? So Beckett, he didn't like it when people told him, you've left us no hope. He says, you haven't understood my work. My work says there is a hope, but it's this kind of a hope. It's not the sort of hope you've been used to thinking of as hope. There is the hope of waiting because something could happen. At any moment, something can happen. All right? So, of wars and carrots, of conferences and kings, a Beckettian analysis of current events, New World Order, Arab Spring, Sykes-Picot coming off a new direction today. Maybe we'll have a president before Beckett, before Godot comes in Lebanon. I don't know. The things he talks about really have echoes throughout all of the 20th century, and I think into anything we do if we understand it properly. And I guess you're voting with your feet. You're leaving, so you don't want me to read anything. I will go on reading anyway, if you don't want to listen. I'm going to read Lucky's speech, just to give you, a kind of a theatrical, direct experience of this is the longest speech in the whole work. Okay, this is Lucky, who's the slave of the master Pozzo. But we find out there's no real distinction. Pozzo is just as much as a slave as Lucky, and Lucky is just as much as a master of that. But this is Lucky now. He's like a donkey on a rope, and he's being made now to entertain them because he used to think well. Reason. He used to think well. Look at what reason has become like. A phonograph record where the needle has gotten stuck. We don't use phonograph records, but you might understand that. Given the existence is uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman of a personal God, quack, 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 with white beard, quack, 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 outside time, without extension, who from the heights of divina Pathia, divina Thambia, divina Phasia, loves us dearly, with some exceptions, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, and suffers like the divine Miranda with those who for reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torrents, plunged in fire, whose fire flames, if that continues, and who can dodge it will fire, the firmament, that is to say, hell to heaven, so blue, still, and calm, so calm with a calm, which even though intermittent is better than nothing, but not so fast, and considering what is more, that as a result of the labors left unfinished, crowd by the Academy of Anthropometry, of Essay and Posse, of Testu and Cunard, it is established beyond all doubt, all other doubt than that which clings to the labors of men, that as a result of the labors unfinished of Testu and Cult, it is established as hereafter, but not so fast for reasons unknown. For as a result of the public works of Puncher and Watman, it is established beyond all doubt that in view of the labors of Fartov and Belcher, left unfinished for reasons unknown, of Testu and Cunard, left unfinished, it is established what many deny, that man in Posse of Testu and Cunard, that man in Essay, that man in short, that man in brief, in spite of the strides of alimentation and defecation, is seen to waste and pine, and concurrently, simultaneously, what's more, for reasons unknown, in spite of the strides of physical culture, the practice of sports such as tennis, football, running, cycling, swimming, floating, riding, gliding, conating, carnegie, skating, the tennis of all kinds, dying, flying, sports of all sides, alumni, summer, winter, water, sun, tennis of all kinds, hockey, all sorts of penicillin, and succedanea, in a word, I resume, and concurrently, simultaneously, for reasons unknown, to shrink and dwindle, in spite spite of the tennis, I resume flying, gliding, golf over mine, and 18 holes, tennis of all sorts, in a word, for reasons unknown, in Feckham and Peckham and Fulham and Clapham, namely concurrently, simultaneously, what's more, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, to shrink and dwindle, I resume Fulham, Clapham, in a word, the dead loss per capita since the death of Bishop Berkeley, being in the tune of 1 inch 4 ounce per capita, approximately, by and large, more or less to the nearest decimal, good measure, round figures, stark naked in the stockinged feet, in Connemara, in the word, for reasons unknown. So matter what matter, the facts are there, and considering what's more, much more grave, that in the light of the labours lost of Steinweg and Peterman, it appears what is more for much grave than the light of labours lost of Steinweg, that in the plains and the mountains of the seas by the rivers. He goes on like this, and what do they do in the play? Of course, they're trying to get him to stop. So they start kicking him, and he won't stop, so then they take off his hat. I think this is actually the scene that's happening there. It's great fun, if you ever have a chance to attend it. It's great fun. But, the whole point of this whole speech, and hopefully you look at it more carefully, it seems to have some things in there that are of great worth and merit, and the qua, Peter qua CVSP teacher, Peter qua human, Peter qua idiot, qua, it specifies certain things about you. That's what the qua. What does qua become like? Quack, 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 like the quacking of a duck, you see. So anything important has been reduced to just, entertainment, passing the time, whatever. Thank you for your attention.